I'm now recording, I think. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, computers in the ham shack. All right. I gave this presentation a few years ago when we were all meeting on Zoom because of COVID, and I didn't record it at the time. So I really wanted to get the recording going this time so we could actually have a record of the fact that this presentation exists. But let's go ahead and see what we got. So computers. All right. Wait. Computers is the question. How many computers do I need? Well, how many do you have? If you have n computers, you need n plus one, right? Oh, no, wait, that's radios, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, one should be plenty, right? I mean, one computer, one person, one computer, right? That should be plenty. Well, computers are general purpose machines. One computer should be able to do everything I want, right? Maybe. So how many computers do we need? 2, 3, 5, 10. Wait a minute. I'm not made of money. I can't get 10 computers. What are you talking about? Besides, why would I need so many? And I'd rather buy radios, not computers. Dan is a proficient N+1 radio guy. So he's definitely the man of many radios.
A few other numbers behind for one.
100 radios? That's not enough, right? Yeah. No, let's
just into the power.
So yeah, right, to the power instead of +1. It's exponential. Well, you may want to have more than one computer because you may want to dedicate a computer to a specific use. We're going to talk about it. So what can I do with all of these computers? Well, what do you want to do is the question. What do you want to do with your computers? There's a lot of things you can do with a computer that are related to ham radio. Logging, digital modes, looking up information, WinLink, SDR, mesh, more things. We're going to talk about these and go into these in a little more depth. So let's talk about logging. We actually had a presentation on logging a few years ago. It was in our advanced topics class, which this is also our advanced topics class. For those who are not familiar with our classes, we do 3 classes a month. We're very unusual in regards to local radio clubs in that we do meet 3 times a month. Our first meeting on the first Thursday of the month is what we call our basic topics class. And that's really kind of the, oh, look, this is a radio, right? Type of class. It's a class that is geared for the absolute beginner. So for the person who, yes, they have a radio or they got their license, they haven't done anything with it. They don't know what to do with it. They want to know what to do with it. The second Thursday is our, what we call our advanced topics class. And that's for more of the ham who's actually been on the radio a few times and they want to learn some more things that they can do with it. And then our third class is just kind of a general purpose class. It could cover any topic. In fact, one of our goals has been to have some third-party speakers come in for those, and we've done that a few times. So this being a second Thursday is kind of our advanced topics class. So do I think computers in the ham shack are really an advanced topic? Depends on how you use them. Depends on what you want to do with them. There are things you can do with a computer very easily that I wouldn't consider to be advanced. Yeah. We're going to talk about tablets. So logging, these are just some of the highlights from the logging presentation. You run logging software on your computer, and there's a bunch of different ones out there, Logger32, Klog, CRQ, logging, ham radio logger, lots of different pieces of software that you could run directly on your machine. You can also access logging systems on the web. For example, Logbook of the World, QRZ logging, EQSL cards. Who knows what QSL cards are? The older hams should know what those are. So back in the day, hams would actually fill out a piece of paper and slap a stamp on it and mail it to you if they made contact with you on the radio. And people would collect these and they'd post them, hang them on the wall or whatever. And that was kind of cool to do that. Nowadays, I don't think a lot of people know what the mailbox in the front of their house is for. It may even be down the street and they never go to it, right? So we've developed a way to do those QSL cards online. We call them EQSL cards. So that may be something that you want to check out and see what you can do with. Some people still do the physical paper cards, which are still kind of cool. A friend of mine, what's that? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, QSL card, stick that on the wall, right? Yeah. A friend of mine, Jeff McGrath, N1SC, he made up this QSL card that is absolutely fantastic. It's got like a lightning bolt on it. He's a photography buff, and he has a lightning trigger for his camera. And so whenever there's lightning storms, he goes out and tries to get pictures of lightning bolts, and it's pretty slick. It looks really good. But his QSL card that he made up has that picture on it, and people will put different things on their QSL cards, so it's kind of fun. Also, we've talked in the past about POTA and SOTA logging. POTA is parks on the air. SOTA is summits on the air. So these are different things you can do with your radio, let's say, where you haul your radio gear to a park, like a national park, or are state parks on POTA? I don't know if they are.
Yeah.
Are they state parks? So state park or something like that. You set up your equipment and you go online, you spot yourself so that people looking at the website will know you're there, and people try to make contact with you. And if you get a certain number of contacts, that qualifies as an activation. You have to log that those contacts took place. You need to do that through some kind of a computing device. I'm not going to say it has to be a computer, but some kind of computing device. SOTA does the same thing with mountain summits. Every mountain summit has an identifying number. People will climb to the top of the mountain with their radio gear, set up, put an antenna up, crank up their radio, and start trying to make contacts. It's pretty cool stuff. And it's a good way to get people involved in making their gear portable and getting out in nature and still being able to play radio. So we all love to play radio. So logging is one thing you can do. Digital modes, we've had a lot of classes on digital modes. We've talked about APRS, we've talked about packet radio, we've talked about JS8. These are just some classes that we had. There's a lot more digital modes that we haven't talked about. RTTY, AMTOR, PSK31, FT8, there's tons of them. There's as many digital modes as there are digits. So, you know, you can find a lot of things out there about that. Let's talk about looking up information. What do we do with our computer most of the time? If you've got a computer at home and you don't use it for work, what do you use it for? I was using mine just this afternoon. My wife was watching this show called The Rookie, and she said, I wonder, those guys look a lot alike, the guy who plays the father and the guy who plays the son. I wonder if they're actually related. I went on imdb.com, pulled up the information about the show, figured out who the actors were for those two roles, and no, they were not actually related, even though they look a lot alike. So we use our computers all the time for looking stuff up. We use them for web browsing. We use them for YouTube. We use them for keeping up to date on news. We use them for media, like social media and traditional media. How many people used to get a newspaper, a physical newspaper? How many people still get a physical newspaper? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, but if you're interested in looking at the newspaper, Salt Lake Trib, for example, and Deseret News have a website you can go to. They still write stories and put them up there, and you can go look at them. You can even subscribe online for things like that. We use our computers for email. We use them for chat, instant messaging, things like Google Chat, Slack, Discord. We use them for video conferencing, like we're doing right now with Zoom. Also Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, lots of Skype. Is Skype still a thing? Skype. We use our computers for a lot of different things, right? You can do amateur radio things on the computer as well. So you may look up amateur radio stuff. You may watch amateur radio related videos or whatever. So WinLink, we had a class on WinLink. We actually have had several classes where we've talked about WinLink, one of which was recorded. The others, for whatever reason, were not recorded. But we've had several classes on using WinLink. We even had a multi-club WinLink workshop last summer, July 27th, where people from Murray Club, Sandy, Draper, Harriman, Salt Lake Crossroads, Taylorsville. I don't even know how many clubs were involved in that. We had a bunch of people there. There were probably over, I want to say over 50 people there learning about WinLink and getting their radios and computers set up to be able to do WinLink. So what is WinLink? I can see it in people's eyes. They're sitting there thinking, wow, you had all this great things on WinLink. What the heck is it? WinLink is a way to do email over RF and over the internet too. But in amateur radio, we care more about being able to do things over RF. So it'll do it over VHF, UHF for you technicians out there, and it'll do it over HF for you general and extra class people out there. You'd want to have a machine set up as a WinLink client. So the software would be a package called WinLink Express. This could be the same machine as your logging machine, your web browsing machine, or it could be a dedicated system. If you want to run your own RMS gateway, you would definitely want a dedicated machine for that. You don't want to be trying to do interactive stuff on a machine while it's busy trying to be an RMS gateway. RMS is, if you think about the WinLink system, it's a 3-tiered system. You have the client, which would be WinLink Express. You have the middle tier, which is called RMS, and then you have the top tier, which is called the CMS, or the Central Messaging System, or servers. When you are doing WinLink, you might make a VHF connection to an RMS system that is connected over the internet to the CMS. And if the internet happens to be down, you may be able to make a connection to a hybrid RMS system that uses HF to connect to another RMS system that can connect to the CMS and get information passed that way. So you may want to run your own RMS system. If you do, you would want a dedicated PC for that. Okay. SDR and WebSDR. Who knows what SDR stands for? Software defined radio. That's right. Thank you, Steve. So we've had a couple of classes on software defined radio as well. We talked about the WebSDR specifically. WebSDR is basically a bunch of SDR, software defined radio receivers, that are accessible on the internet through a web interface. Why would you need that, you're thinking? What is that good for? Well, it's actually sitting there monitoring stuff, typically with a good antenna system. There's one in Corinne, Utah, the Utah SDR, that is Corinne, is that how you say it? Corinne. And you can tune around to any of the bands. So I heard Gordon say that he didn't have any HF equipment, so he doesn't do HF stuff. But if you wanted to do some HF listening, even as a technician, you can hop on the WebSDR without buying any equipment and tune around and listen to things happening on HF. It's a great way to get your ears tuned in to listening to things on HF and hearing what they sound like. So when you do get your general and you go buy some equipment, you're not like, what is this doing? I don't understand anything. I can't make out what these guys are saying. You're used to listening to it. So a PC would be useful for accessing WebSDR. But if you have your own SDR receiver, then you can monitor things locally as well. I've got a Raspberry Pi at home with a SDR receiver on it. I think, I don't remember what I paid for the SDR receiver, like $40 or something like that. And I can use that to monitor pretty much any frequency that it can receive. So there's software available for trunk decoding, so you can listen to public service radios. There's software for decoding other protocols. So if somebody's doing, FT8 or JS8 or something like that, and you want to kind of peer over their shoulder and see what they're saying, there's software that will decode that so you can watch it on the SDR. It's pretty cool. All right. Let's see. Mesh networking. So we talked about mesh networking way back in 2020. Mesh networking is high-speed networking. So you know how you have your Wi-Fi network at home? There are companies that do commercial Wi-Fi for that last mile to the home. And they have equipment that was designed for that, that has, you know, big antennas and things like that on it. They put them on towers and stuff. Some amateur radio guys got together and said, I'll bet we could use that equipment because the Wi-Fi bands overlap with the amateur radio bands. We could use that equipment and do things with amateur radio on that kind of equipment and build our own high-speed networks. A mesh network is a setup where, say you've got 5 stations, the stations will figure out what the best path between each station is, and will use that path for communications. So if you've got, you know, a mesh set up and one of the nodes drops out, the others will dynamically reconfigure so that the network stays up and running. We've actually got a proposal in the works for building a mesh network here in Murray. Dan, you have a comment?
I talked to Nick today.
You did? All right, let's talk after. So mesh network is kind of cool. It basically lets you run your own little LAN, essentially, or MAN, metropolitan area network, on Wi-Fi bands that are overlapping in the hand bands. So you're running on amateur radio frequencies and do all kinds of stuff. Things that people have done are run software like Person Finder, Etherpad, which is a shared notepad. You can run a file server so that other people can access files over this mesh network. Chat services. WinLink runs great over a mesh network, and it runs extremely fast compared to over even a VHF network. rClone allows you to synchronize file systems. There's a system called Asterisk that is a voice over IP system. If you have that running on your mesh network, you can have an actual IP phone that looks just like a regular telephone, and in fact is a regular telephone. And you can, what's that?
Cell phone.
Telephone. There is actually some VoIP software that you can run on a cell phone. So if you connect your Wi-Fi on your cell phone to the mesh Wi-Fi, you could run a soft phone on your cell phone and do the same kind of thing. But there are actually physical phones that you can get, and the club actually owns at least 8 of them. And you can tie these in, and with Asterisk, you can have voicemail, you can have, you know, dial by extension number or dial by name or call sign in our case. You could use that in an emergency type of situation to, say, put a phone at the hospital ER and put a phone in a fire truck, and the firefighter could pick up the phone and dial the number for the hospital ER and talk to them over the mesh network. Pretty darn slick. There probably are ways, but whenever you start doing stuff like that, you've got to start worrying about usage and following the rules on the amateur side, right? So, I mean, people have done that. They've done that even with regular repeaters.
There's a
And
gateway for
there's a gate there. It's been done. Let's put it that way. There are people who have put what they call auto patches on amateur radio repeaters so that from your handheld, you can dial a phone number and make a phone call on the public switch telephone network, the PSTN. That's outside the scope of this talk, but we can discuss it another time. But there's a lot of things you can do with a mesh network. A lot of those things require you to have a computer sitting on that mesh network that lets you run those pieces of software. Some of them don't, like the chat services can run directly on the radio hardware, the Wi-Fi radio box, and it can run without a PC.
The good thing with all that is you don't need a powerful computer.
Doesn't have to be a very powerful machine. We'll talk about what kind of machines you need. So, all right. So has anybody ever heard of Geochron? Geochron is a totally cool device. It's like this world clock that hangs on the wall and shows you what time it is everywhere on the planet and where the sun is shining and things like that. Geochron has completely mechanical versions of this, and now they have electronic versions of this that can do all kinds of crazy stuff. You can have overlays and things like that to show things. It's really cool. It's also not cheap. It's really expensive. The mechanical ones can cost up to $3,000. That's actual thousands of cash monies, right? I don't have that kind of a budget for something that looks cool. The softer ones are around $450. And if I'm going to spend $450, I'm probably going to buy a radio, not a clock, right? But you'll see people out there who have these, and they're really cool. They're pretty cool. Now, there's also this thing called Ham Clock, which is almost as cool, but it's also free, which makes it a lot cooler in my mind. I'm a big fan of free. We'll talk more about free in a minute, but I'll just say I'm a big fan of free. It runs on a PC. It can display all kinds of cool stuff. You can see this display is showing the solar flux on one panel. It's showing accessibility for the various bands, like how the bands are getting across. You can see 80 meter is showing at 87%, 40 meters showing at 99, and like 17, 15, 12, and 10 are not getting any propagation at all. It can show you the time at your local location and weather information for your local location and at a distant location as well. It can plot those things on the map. It can plot satellites on the map. It can plot all kinds of stuff on the map that you
It
go
also
through.
shows my 401k tanking.
You're down to $71 in your 401k. And then, so my son, when he worked for UPS, he entered into their retirement plan and contributed some money to it. And then when he left UPS, he's never done anything with it since. In fact, the letters keep coming to our house, even though he hasn't lived at our house in 20 years. But yeah, I think he's down to probably negative money in there by now. So, that can happen. But I mean, no, it's this is a cool application. It's kind of clunky, kind of crufty, but it's also free. So you kind of get what you paid for it, right?
And the actual useful stuff is on the side.
I mean, the clock and the map, yeah, that's fine. But the interesting things are like how well RF is getting out on the various bands and things like that, what the sunspot situation looks like. And these things, these little panels are all configurable, so you can put what you want there. It's pretty slick. It's not too bad. All right, so how many computers do I need again? Well, you can probably get by with one, okay? Most people, what they want to do, you can probably get by with one, right? One general purpose machine, you can use it for logging, you can use it for digital modes, you can use it for APRS, you can use it for WinLink Express. That's probably what most people are going to be doing, right? However, you may want more than one. You might want a dedicated WinLink RMS node if you're interested in helping to build the RMS network. You may want to run Ham Clock. Ham Clock runs great on a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is like $22. We'll talk more about that in a minute. You may want to separate your logging from your information lookup. Now, a dual monitor on a regular computer might be perfect for that, but you might want to have two computers for that. You might want a machine for your SDR for monitoring what's going on different frequencies and hearing what you can hear, or for running your web SDR stuff. You may want to dedicate a machine for the mesh networking stuff. There's a lot of things you might want to do with computers. So you may want more than one. You may get by with one. You may want more than one. That's a decision that you have to make in conjunction with your spouse typically. So your spouse may say, you have a computer, don't you? Don't you have a computer? Yes, dear, I have a computer, but I don't have another computer right now. So it's just like I have a radio, but I don't have that radio, right, Dan? So yes, well, I only have three. And remember, two is one is none, right? So three is only two. So technically you really only have two. And since two is one, you really only have one. And since one is none, you obviously don't have really any. So
Anytime a radio shows up at the house that I buy, my wife will intercept and she said, "What's this?" And I go, "Nothing to see here." And then, "Oh, okay. And then we continue on with their day.
I love your wife, Jeff. All right. So what kind of computer? You might get a used computer, an old computer, or do you want to get a new computer? Do you want a laptop, a desktop, a server, an SBC? We'll talk about SBC in a minute and what that actually means. Do I want a PC? Do I want a Linux machine? Do I want a Macintosh? Do I want a tablet? Android or iOS? What's the difference? Why do I care? Let's talk about these. Old versus new. How many of us have an old PC sitting in a closet somewhere or an old laptop sitting there gathering dust, right? I mean, everybody's got one or knows somebody who has one. Yeah, exactly, right? It's like I bought a new one because my old one wasn't doing everything I wanted it to do, or I wanted to run XYZ software and that only ran on the new machine. It needed some resource or a better video card or whatever. But I'm not going to throw away a computer that still works, right? Drag that sucker out of there and do something with it. Put it to use. You might want something more reliable, but you can start with whatever you've got, right?
A lot of computers won't update anymore because they're holding series micro,
Yeah, I mean, how many of us have a Windows XT machine kicking around somewhere, right? You're not going to want to run XT anymore, but those things will run Linux just fine. I mean, you can put Linux on there and it will be a very usable machine, even with, 1 gig or 2 gig of RAM. It's still going to run Linux just fine, and you'll be able to accomplish a lot of the goals that you might want to accomplish with a shack computer. Laptop versus desktop. Why do we like laptops so much? I love my laptops. I like them because they're very portable. I can take my laptop, I can stuff it in a backpack, and I can take it with me wherever I'm going. If I'm going over to my son's for the weekend or for the afternoon or something, and I know after we're done talking airplanes, he's going to go off and play video games with his siblings, and I'll just be sitting there on the couch, I can pull my laptop out and do whatever I want, right? I can't really do that with my desktop. That's harder to do. Laptops have built-in battery power. So if the power happens to go out, I'm not scrambling around looking for my battery pack to be able to run my computer. I already have a battery in the computer. I can at least get up and working right away. They're great devices for a Go kit. There are some ruggedized laptops out there that can handle being chucked in the Go box and dragged off to the top of a mountain somewhere or to the schoolyard or wherever you have to go to set up to operate, and they can do that just fine. Desktop's not so great for that. But why might I want a desktop? Well, they're great for a fixed installation, like in your shack. We were talking about just Monday about the radio room over at the EOC has this nice console, and it's set up. It's got radios built into it. They're like hooked into it, so the front panels are visible, and it's got a nice desk surface. And there's this big blank panel on the side that a monitor would fit perfectly in. And then you put the computer inside the cabinet, so you're not looking at it all the time. Put a keyboard on top of the table. Now you've got a computing station right there with the radios ready to go. It's perfect for a fixed installation. Desktops are usually cheaper than laptops.
I disagree, because I just bought a new computer. I paid $450 for this laptop, and there is no desktop anywhere that wasn't twice that for what it is. I think laptops are much cheaper.
We're gonna talk about some. We'll see.
We have all used ones.
We'll see what we can come up with here in a minute. So, yeah, Gary.
With the laptop and portability, like you're talking about, can you connect through hotspots without a cell phone with the laptop?
Yes.
Yes, you can. You do need to be potentially careful about that. I'm on the Wi-Fi, the Murray City Fire Wi-Fi right now, right? It's not on my cell phone. It's on the Murray City Wi-Fi, which is in this building. If I go to the hospital, I can get on the hospital's network. If I go to a motel or something like that, I can quickly get on the motel's network. One thing you got to be aware of, though, whenever you're doing that, is some of those networks are not secure. So you may want to invest in some kind of VPN software if you're going to be doing that a lot. Or just be careful about what you're doing, and you probably won't have any problems. But you know, it's certainly safer to bring up a VPN and route all of your traffic through the VPN if you're on a network that you don't know and trust.
I've actually got a device that's like a hotspot. They log into a hotel system, they monitor how the computer. I just put this one down and then I start logging into that.
Yep.
It's got all the built-in protocols, everything, safety, it's got a hard
Yep.
drive in it. That's a SSD drive.
When I worked at LinkedIn, I used to carry a hotspot device that was about this big, and it had a cell phone built into it, but not for phone, just for data. And it would present a Wi-Fi signal that I could connect my laptop to. So if I was riding the train or sitting on the pier up in San Francisco or something like that, I could spin that thing up and connect through that and do anything I needed to do for work or whatever. So
What I was asking is, in the event of a serious emergency, say for example, and the cell phones won't be working. I'm wondering if through a Wi-Fi hotspot, you could communicate with your computer.
It's on the cellular tower.
yeah, those are typically using the cellular network. Now, what you could do though is you could build an ad hoc network. So say you had several operators in a room together, you could make an ad hoc network that all of the machines in that room connected to, so you could talk to each other, you could connect to each other and pass files back and forth and things like that without using a network outside the building. It would strictly be local. Yes.
What's the range?
It kind of depends on the hardware that you're using. Like with this laptop, I probably wouldn't get better than about maybe 100 feet. But you know, if I'm using the hotspot built into my phone, I'm probably gonna get maybe 30 feet, 50 feet at the most. But again, you know, I'm probably gonna be sitting in one spot doing what I'm doing. So and if I go into like a hospital, for example, even if the internet is down, the inside network in the hospital should still be working, and I should be able to connect to that network, and so can other people, and then we can still communicate that way within the building. If we are able to build our mesh network that we want to build, it would be very easy to set up a link where you've got a mesh radio on a mast or something, and with it is a local Wi-Fi hotspot that allows other devices to connect, even though they may not be amateur radio operators, they could still connect to it and access services, whatever services you decide to allow them to access.
So the mesh network,
You could easily cover this entire valley with the setup that we're proposing. The setup that we're proposing puts 3 radios on our tower with sector antennas. Each antenna covers 120 degrees. So you could basically cover the entire Salt Lake Valley from that location with the mesh network. We can talk more about mesh networking later, but it is definitely something that we want to get going as a club. We think that would be a valuable resource for the city and for amateurs within the city and within the county, really, not just restricted to Murray. All right, so laptop, desktop, why not neither? You know, the classic, why not both? Well, why not neither? So there's this thing called an SBC, or single board computer. Raspberry Pis, the Pine A64, Rock Pi, Odyssey board. There's a lot of them out there. These are little computers. They're about anywhere from, the Raspberry Pi Zero is about like literally that big.
The 5 just came out.
The 5 is out now.
Yes,
I haven't seen the 5 yet, so. I've got a Pi 4 at home. It's about, maybe that big. And it's got it's got 8 gig of RAM on it. It's got an SD card for storage. So that's what I think I've got a 512 gig card in there. I can run pretty much anything I want to on that. It's got, 8 CPU cores in it. It's a very capable little machine, and it runs on 5 volts from a USB cable. And if I plugged it into my, you guys have seen my big battery pack. If I plug my Raspberry Pi in there, it'll probably run for 3 days on that battery pack without any trouble.
I've used it with 4 too. You can use it with, standard solid state drive.
Yeah, you can plug a regular US, like a USB drive or any kind of SSD or something like that directly
It's a
into
lot
it.
Faster than.
It is.
Right, which really-
Yeah, so these things are out there. They're not expensive. We're going to talk costs in a bit. But yeah, you may choose not to use a laptop or a desktop. You may choose to go with some kind of an SBC, a single board computer. I've seen these also configured for portable desktop use. Jeff, our club secretary, has one. It's in a package about this big. He plugs an external display into it, and he's got a Bluetooth keyboard, and his runs on 12 volts. And so it'll run on your regular ham power supply or on like a car battery or something like that with no voltage conversion necessary. And I don't know what he paid for it, but or what model it is, but it
About $250.
but it runs Windows. I mean, it's a Windows machine.
It's a very
Very capable Windows machine in a package about this big, right? And like that thick. So, I mean, these things are out there. They're not that expensive. They're pretty cool. Can I get by with just a tablet? So tablets, there's several manufacturers that make Android tablets. Samsung's probably the most popular. And then Apple makes their iPads as well. These make great devices for consuming media and data, but they're not really great for creating, mainly because the interface is difficult to use for that. They're good for web browsing, for example, but if you need to type a lot of stuff, they're not that great. Now, with that said, you can see I have here's my tablet. It has a nice little case on it. I can set this up like this, just like a regular computer screen. And I have a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse right here that folds up to a package this big that I can stuff in my backpack or my Go Kit or whatever. And I can type just fine on my tablet.
It all fits in this pocket protector.
Well, if I had a pocket protector, it probably would, but
On my tablet, built it up, set it like yours.
it's got a keyboard built into the case, right? Yeah, I've seen them like that. So
Next directly to it from the tablet. And then you
Oh.
pull apart, straight tablet, plug it back in.
That's cool. I've also seen ones that have like a, I guess you'd call it a keyboard component that the tablet plugs into. And it's actually got batteries and storage like discs in, solid state discs in that base thing as well. So you can have essentially a full computer capability that folds up into a package not much bigger than this, right? So tablets are great. They're super lightweight. They're super portable. They're easy to use. They're not great for multitasking. They're pretty much one task at a time. Dan.
But just saying, I have a Pi 4 that I use with the TNC on it, and I use my tablet
As the display.
for the head.
Yeah.
Right? And,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you can run, there's a software you can run on your tablet that allows you to essentially share or run on your Raspberry Pi that allows you to share the display and keyboard functionality out to an app that's running on your tablet. So rather than having a separate monitor that you have to plug in and a separate keyboard that you have to either plug in or associate with it, you can drive it all through your tablet. VNC, I think, is the most commonly used one. There's also a package from a company called No Machine that's available for free that works very well for that kind of thing. Pretty cool stuff. Tablets are great devices. They're relatively cheap. They're relatively robust. You can get cases for them like this that are designed to protect them from, the typical thing that might damage them, like a dog stepping on the screen or something like that. He says, as he speaks from experience. But yeah, so tablets are great. All right, so what am I looking to spend? I've updated, these prices are new. These are as of today. I went and looked at this because when I did this presentation the first time, these prices are actually better than what they were 2.5 years ago. Okay. The rugged laptop I was looking at back then was $450. I can get a Dell rugged laptop for $330 right now. It's got a screen about that big, and it's got a full keyboard on it. It's a regular laptop. It runs Windows, and it's ruggedized so it can handle harsh conditions. A Raspberry Pi 4, these are available again. For a while, you could not get one, no matter where you went. There was actually a website that was specifically set up to help you find somebody who had them in stock, and believe it or not. And now
They were selling for more than their list.
they were selling for way more than their list price, right?
5 is 80 with 8 it's $80.
Is it 80?
Yeah, and the 5 and the 4 megabyte or gigabyte is 60.
So this link here takes you to the on Amazon to the Cana kit, which includes a power supply, a case, and a few other things that you might want to put your Raspberry Pi in, not just the board itself, but it gives you a few extras with it. I will disclose these links are affiliate links. Any proceeds from these links go directly to keeping the club website up and running. So I think I've made $3 in the last 5 years. So bonus, right? Yeah. So I don't worry too much about it. I have the affiliate account, so I throw the affiliate links up. It's not that big of a deal. I don't worry about it too much. If you're curious, the host that I run the website on costs me about $12.50 a month. So it's really not that bad. I have no problem paying for that just because I like having that resource available. So small format desktop PCs under $100. Raspberry Pi Zero, $22. A MacBook, $930. Yeah, Macs are expensive. But like a Samsung A7 tablet, similar to this one, maybe a little bit smaller screen, $120. I mean, put a Raspberry Pi 4 and an A7 tablet together, it's almost better to just go buy the rugged laptop at that point. You pay the extra, what, $50 and you get the full scale
That's
laptop.
exactly what I have, the A7 plus my pipe, but I have the capability of taking that laptop and doing a whole bunch of other
The
stuff.
tablet,
Yeah,
that's true, yes.
yeah, so
And then if you want to go with the Apple iPad, an iPad 4, the current price on that was $208. So a little bit more than the Android tablet, but still quite reasonable. I've also had pretty good luck searching on publicsurplus.com. That's where I got all those phones, was publicsurplus.com. You can often find a whole pallet of computers for $50. Sometimes it's $50 each, but sometimes it's like, I've got 20 computers on a pallet, $50 and they're yours. Some of them may work, some of them may not. You don't know. But if you take 10 computers, 20 computers, you can probably get 2 or 3 working machines out of that, right? I mean, I've had pretty good luck with that. be aware if you buy stuff on public service, public surplus, sometimes it's pretty beat up, sometimes it's,
You may get what you pay for.
you may get what you pay for, you may get less than what you pay for. I've seen tough books go on there that were used in police applications. So these are computers that sat in a police car for 3 years. And they're selling them for, 60 to 70 bucks. They're still very capable machines and they're super rugged. Tough books are, I mean, you could take a tough book and hurl it at the wall and it would still be working just fine. Right? Unlike my laptop that fell to the floor at the airport a couple of weeks ago. And I just took to the Apple store yesterday to get repaired. So it was not a tough book. That is correct.
This search was coming.
This is actually a website and a lot of different organizations put stuff up on here. So around Utah, I've gotten things on here from UVU, from Salt Lake Community College, from various cities around the state. I bought an oscilloscope off of here for 30 bucks from Las Vegas Tech. And had my son go pick it up for me because he lives in Las Vegas, and got it, works perfectly. Great little oscilloscope for 30 bucks. I mean, when new, it was probably $1,400. So it sat in a student lab for probably 5 or 6 years. And then they upgraded to some new version and they wanted to get rid of their old ones. So that's how stuff shows up on this public surplus site. Sometimes the stuff is in pretty rough shape, so just be aware. Let's see. Okay, let's talk about operating systems. So Windows can do pretty much whatever you want, right? You're probably going to want an x86 type processor or an AMD processor or something like that, Intel or AMD. But Windows 11 will run on an ARM CPU. So if you trust Windows 11, you could go with an ARM platform like the Raspberry Pi or something like that. But I would say you're probably better off to stick with something that's Intel or Intel compatible. Most people are pretty familiar with Windows. Most software costs a little bit of money, but not a crazy amount of money. Sometimes you'll run into situations where the drivers don't work quite right. This happens typically when you buy hardware devices from China and they use counterfeit chips, and those chips need older versions of the drivers that don't validate that the chip is not counterfeit, whereas the driver that's included with the OS does validate that and doesn't work with those things. So you'll see that typically with programming cables for Baofeng handhelds. If you are aware of what you're doing, you can make sure to buy a cable that's compatible, that has a chipset that's supported. But yeah, Windows, good operating system, does what it says on the tin, right? It makes the computer do its thing, and you can install software, run things, works pretty well. Linux, there's tons of free software out there for Linux. Linux itself is free. They like to say it's free as in speech, not free as in beer, but I don't know. The one thing about it, if you break it, you get to keep both pieces. There's nobody going to hold your hand with this thing, right? It's a hobbyist solution. You need to know something about what you're doing when you're fooling around with Linux. If you don't, can you still use it and do useful things? Yes, you can, but will you feel much happier and be much safer if you know something about it? Yes. Some systems will only run Linux, like Raspberry Pi, for example, but solutions do exist to make it easier to use. KM4ACK, Jason, he has built this package called 73 Linux script. And you basically, he tells you, run this command, and you can copy and paste it into the computer. And you run that command and it will pull down the latest version of his stuff. And then do this, and you'll run it, and a little interface will pop up and it'll walk you through installing various pieces of software to do different kinds of things that you might want to do on your computer.
You don't have to know Linux, you don't have to.
You don't have
Unix,
to.
You don't need to do CLI, you don't need to do any of that stuff. He explains everything.
He explains everything. Jason is great. He's
Sure, any command line would help.
And as far as Windows software, theoretically, you can run some Windows software on Linux using Wine. Wine stands for Wine is not an emulator. It is not a Windows emulator. It is a library of Windows compatible functions. But with that said, some people have designed software to run on Windows that takes advantage of undocumented Windows features. And since they're undocumented, Wine does not implement them. Those pieces of software will probably not run very well. Most of the ham related stuff is probably going to run just fine. I've run WinLink Express, which is a Windows package on Linux, no trouble with Wine, works perfectly. All right. Mac OS, if you got a Mac, you got to have Mac OS. If you got Mac OS, you got to have a Mac. They kind of go hand in hand. There is some ham software out there. There isn't a lot of ham software out there for the Mac. It's relatively easy to use the OS. It's a very consistent UI, but it's not cheap because you have to have Apple hardware to run it. And remember, we talked about Apple hardware, the lowest end MacBook being $930 versus the ruggedized Dell laptop being $330, right? So keep that in mind. Most software that you get for the Mac is going to cost you money. You can run Windows software on a Mac, but in order to do so, you need to buy more software called Parallels or Crossover to allow you to run the Windows applications in the Mac environment. You could also run Windows directly on the Mac using Boot Camp, but why buy Mac hardware and pay 3 times as much if you're just going to run Windows on it? So,
Because you do
exactly.
John,
So I personally, I love the Mac for software development. I love my Macintosh. It's a great machine for software development. It's a great machine for a systems administrator. It's a great machine for people who do graphic design or video production or things like that. Some great interfaces, great tools and things like that. But if I was going to recommend an operating system for a home ham shack machine, I would probably say run Windows, just because you're going to have less trouble with that.
My mom always told me not to put it in my food, so.
So you don't own a Mac, you don't own an Apple. Yeah.
And top it off, it's
Bruce.
John,
They should run on Windows 11. Yeah, they should.
An issue, like JSK and all the other stuff that.
Windows 11 does some things differently from the way Windows 10 does it. One thing that we encountered getting WinLink running on Windows 11 versus Windows 10 is that on Windows 10, the application can make changes to the sound settings. On Windows 11, it can't. It's not allowed to do that. You have to do that through the sound control panel. So if you're trying to do things like any kind of sound card modes, you will run into difficulties when doing them on Windows 11. You can still do it, you can accomplish it, but it may not be clear what you have to do to make it work the way you want it to work. And if, say, you're going to run Direwolf and JS8 Call, you may have to go into the sound card settings and change things because JS8 Call requires different settings from what Direwolf does, for example. In Windows 10, Direwolf could say, oh, I'm going to use the sound card. I'll set it the way I want it and go do its thing. And JS8 Call, when you fire that up, could say, I'll set the sound card the way I want it and it can go do its thing. Can't do that in Windows 11. So you may run into situations like that. I mean, I don't have a Windows 11 machine, but those are some things that we encountered at that Windows WinLink workshop. Dan.
I bought this laptop specifically for my ham radio stuff. And mostly because it comes with, I had a 12-volt plug-in thing that runs it, so I can run off grid, right? And it keeps on coming up with, do you wanna now go to Windows 11 free upgrade? And I keep on saying no, because I'm not convinced that I'll be able to run all my hand stuff, because I do PSK 31 and FT8, and there's so much stuff that
Well, that was my question. If that stuff runs,
It may run just fine. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. The problem is, for like Dan's case, if he upgrades to Windows 11 and finds that something doesn't work the way he wants it to, getting back to Windows 10 is non-trivial.
Yeah.
Right? It's basically wipe the entire machine and reinstall Windows 10 from scratch. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Now, you may have perfect luck with Windows 11. It may do everything you want it to do. And if so, that's great. But you may find that some things don't work the way you expect them to if you're used to older versions of Windows. So,
And I suspect at some point I'm gonna be forced
you
to
do,
go to 11, but I want to delay that, because by then, hopefully.
all the software
all
vendors will
software
have caught up.
catch up.
Yeah.
That's the theory.
2025.
End of life for Windows 10. Yeah. So
Yes, yes.
you still got another year and a half to go, right? So, all right. So tablet operating systems. Well, if you buy a tablet, it's going to have an operating system on it. You don't get a lot of choice in that. It'll either be an Android or iOS, which is the Apple operating system. Even less software is available for Android and iOS. There is, excuse me, there is some out there. For applications that do exist, it's really easy to use. Those devices are designed to be easy to use. The software is usually pretty consistent with other applications on those platforms. So if you're used to the iPad, for example, you will find that ham radio software that runs on the iPad looks and feels like other iPad software. It's not weird, right? And same thing if you're used to Android, you'll find that some things work just fine on Android. Now, that said, there is a WinLink package for Android that is even more terrible to use than WinLink Express. In that just the manipulations that you have to go through to do it. Now, I've used it, it works, but it's kind of painful. There is a version of a WinLink compatible piece of software for iOS, and it supposedly works very well, but it also costs $20. So, since I don't have an iPad, I haven't really dug into that. But oftentimes with a tablet, it's hard to hook up additional hardware to it. Some tablets support what they call USB on the go or OTG. Not all tablets will support that. iPads do not support that capability. You can only communicate with those through Bluetooth devices. But if your extra gear will interface via Bluetooth, it'll work pretty well. For example, the Mobilink Bluetooth KISS TNC will let you do packet radio, WinLink, APRS, all that kind of stuff. It connects to your tablet via Bluetooth, and it just appears as a device on your tablet, so you can select it and do things with it. It works. All right, software. Let's talk about some software here. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're getting close to the end here.
Yeah, we got 10 minutes.
That's okay. We only got a couple slides left, so we should be all right. In fact, this might be our last slide, actually. So categories of ham radio software. We talked about logging. There's general purpose logging. There's SOTA, POTA, Logbook of the World, those kinds of things. Communications. We've talked about VoIP. We've talked about digital modes. We talked about WinLink. We didn't talk about slow scan TV, but that's another ham radio software thing that you can run on a PC. Slow scan TV is kind of cool. If you guys have ever used it.
Yep, time.
Long time.
I've got, let's see, do I have it on here? I don't know if I have it on here.
First, which is the earthquake damage in California came across full scan TV.
Yeah, so one of the what slow scan TV does is it lets you take a picture and it converts it into audio tones that you can play over the radio. And then a receiver hears those audio tones and converts them back into a picture on the other side, right? So it could be useful to you in an emergency type of situation. Say you're looking at a building and you want the opinion of one of the fire department guys on if it's safe to go in there or not, you could take a picture of the building, and if the fire department guy sees that it's leaning like this, he's gonna tell you not to go in there, right? But yeah, tilt your camera, yeah. But there is slow scan TV apps for Android. I don't know if there is for the Apple iPhone stuff, but there is for Android that you can run and send and receive pictures on that, also on your PCs as well. So there's design verification software. We talked before the meeting started, we were talking about Mamanagal and EasyNet, which are two antenna modeling packages that are software packages run on a computer. You can also do things like RF path propagation coverage, things like that. Station management, things like rig control, antenna direction control. With WinLink, for example, if you've got a radio that supports a directional antenna and an antenna rotator on your antenna tower, you could actually have your WinLink software tell your radio to tune to a particular band and frequency and point the antenna in a particular direction before trying to make the connection. So pretty slick stuff. Let's see, you could have reference material. Repeater book is a list of repeaters all over the world. So, that can be useful. Call sign lookup, maps, your radio documentation, satellite tracking, things like that. And tactical situational management like APRS, your ICS forms, you could have those on the computer. Makes it a lot easier to keep track of things if it's all in one place. Always terrible when you spent 20 minutes filling out a form and somebody pours a cup of coffee on top of it, right? That's a horrible thing to have happen. Computers help, well, unless somebody pours a cup of coffee on your computer. But if you've got one of those ruggedized Dell laptops, then hey, just shake it out and keep working. So anyway, that's the end of the presentation. So any questions or comments at this time will be included in the recording. And if not, we'll end the recording and we'll continue from there. There is still quite a bit of bread left. There's still a good 70 centimeters. there's a good call it maybe 12 centimeters of bread left. So microwave bread. Other comments, any questions?
John, I've got one.
The name of it, the date, I don't know, the date for the class. It was, let me find it again. It was March 11th, 2021. If you go on the website and you hit the little search icon and type in antenna, you'll find it.
Okay.
Other questions? You guys ever watch The Muppet Show? There used to be this bit on The Muppet Show where they were in the operating room and all the Muppets were like operating on the guy and the dog was the surgeon. And then the announcer would come on and start speaking and they'd all be looking around like, where's that coming from, And now the patient is about to be put under. Anyway, other questions, comments?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time, and I will end the recording.